Hi, welcome. In this short video, what I propose to do is discuss a little bit the idea of common humanity. More specifically, really to discuss common humanity as it is applied in the CCT cultivation process. And I'll try not to get too technical in terms of like science, etc., psychology, even though I'm not really an expert in those areas anyhow. But I'm going to try to make this useful in terms of helping those of us developing this skill of perceived common humanity. Useful for those of us working on the compassion cultivation process. I thought the best way to do this would be to frame this in terms of the actual meditation practice. So I thought we would begin with a short meditation, approximately 10 minutes, and then I'll discuss a few points around the idea of common humanity with the ability to reference back to that meditation. Really, I think in general, in any of these meditations, what we're doing is retraining our brain on one level. I don't like to reduce everything to brain. We're retraining our outlook on the world, retraining ourselves in the way we relate to ourselves and others, and the world in general. One of the words for meditation in the Tibetan language is Gom, and I see that as translated often as habituation or familiarization. And again, I think that really gets to the fact that what we're really doing is retraining, rehabituating our minds and our outlooks. So we can expect resistances, we can expect some difficulties. If you think about some other ways that people might train themselves, I can think of learning a musical instrument or learning any skill. Taking on a new exercise routine. I'm someone who's right now trying to undertake a little bit of yoga after many, many years of not being flexible. There are tons of challenges in this, and the challenges are many faceted. And in the compassion cultivation process, that will be the same. We're rehabituating our minds, our emotions, our perceptions, really, to see the world differently, to experience the world differently. And there will be some pushback. What's the phrase? Old habits die hard. And part of these resistances will be in our own buy-in to this process. It's ultimately a self-directed process, so I encourage each of you to really think through this stuff and decide, is this useful? How is it useful? And really analyze and reflect, which is another aspect of this type of meditation, often called analytical meditation. I think we often think of meditation as settling the mind, de-stressing, almost like an escape, a vacation from the stressful world. This type of meditation is very different. We're using the cognitive processes. We're using our reflective abilities, our reflective skills, again, to retrain ourselves. So it's not simply a retreat, it's also a full engagement with the world, which can be another challenging aspect of these meditations. I think now 5 weeks into the course, 6 weeks into the course, it's very evident that in these practices we're really engaging with our relationships in the world. This step that we call common humanity is really based on a Buddhist idea of equanimity, a particular type of equanimity. Equanimity in regards to our relationships to others and to ourselves, implicitly at least. Matthieu Ricard calls this impartiality. I like to think of this whole process as softening the edges. We have developed a lot of biases, judgments, categories and boxes and labels that we interpret the world through, including ourselves. These include storylines, projections of many kind. And we're softening these up a bit. And really the basic, fundamental thing that we're doing, Thupten Jinpa in his book calls it the power of perceived similarity. Instead of habitually and at a default level perceiving difference first, often difference in the context of negativity, we're going to perceive similarity first, but it's a particular type of similarity. It's similarity based on this recognition of common humanity. It's not similarity in the sense of I see another white man or another person of my socioeconomic status or someone who likes music or sports or whatever similar to myself. It's not that type of similarity. It's a similarity based on this common humanity. This recognition of the similarity in the sense of a common aspiration of happiness and desire for suffering that's within us all, that each of us have. The power of perceived similarity. That word perceived there is very important as well. It's really at a gut instinctual level that we, ideally at least, will be able to perceive people, others, as similar to ourselves on this fundamental level. The Dalai Lama speaks of having a sense of affection, a sense of kinship towards everyone he meets, initially and instantaneously. To me, that's almost inconceivable, but I can imagine that it is so. I can imagine that we could train ourselves to do that. And I can imagine that that would be a very wonderful and beneficial way to live. It's important that in this perceived similarity, we're seen to the core of the person. And part of our resistances might be that we might not want to do that with some persons. The quote-unquote difficult persons. Persons who maybe have values different than our own. Maybe actually cause a lot of harm. What good is this practice of common humanity in those instances? So I encourage you to just explore this and use yourself as a laboratory. Experiment with your own mind, your own reactions, your own lived world. In my experiences, I'm very much on this path, not someone who's taken the path to its fullest. But as I've embarked on this path, I do have a sense that common humanity, an experience of common humanity, does not in any way justify harmful actions. It's not in any way let others off the hook for their harmful actions. But it does soften the edges a bit and take some of the harshness out of our evaluations. So I can conceive that someone like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, like countless other inspirational figures that we may have, that type of person would be able to experience the common humanity of another, but at the same time have very clear boundaries about what is right and wrong, and clear expectations. So to me, it would not in any way diminish the ability, for instance, to advocate for justice, to fight injustice. But again, I encourage you to explore the practice for yourself and see what effects it has upon you. So I spoke a little more than I intended. Let's just drop into maybe an 10 minute meditation and discuss a little more. So simply allow your mind to settle. First, perhaps by dropping into your body, being aware of your body, adjusting your posture in a way that's beneficial for you. Allow your body to be alert, upright, but also as relaxed as possible. You may scan the body for tension, and allow these places of tension to release a bit and relax. And then gently allow the mind to rest on the breath. Like a feather gently floating in the breeze. Your attention is there, but lightly. There's a spaciousness to it. So gently rest there. Be with your breathing as you inhale. And as you exhale. And now let's drop in for a moment into our self-compassion. First, infuse your breath with the spirit of compassion. Feel compassion as you breathe in, and then compassion as you breathe out. Feel this compassion in your mind, in your body. Perhaps a sense of groundedness. Perhaps a sense of spaciousness. Perhaps a sense of gentle, open presence, with an attitude of curiosity and care, concern. And now direct this perspective to yourself. From the perspective of compassion, see yourself listening or watching this video, reflecting, meditating. Get a sense of this person who is doing this. And they get a sense of some suffering. that this person may be experiencing in their life right now. And bring discriminating awareness to this suffering. What is it? How is it affecting you? What's the core of this suffering? Tap into this core and reflect on countless others who also, right now, are experiencing this type of suffering. Include these other beings in your field of awareness as well. You and these countless others share in this suffering. So generate compassion for yourself first. May I be free of this suffering. May I have happiness and peace and joy. Now spread that wish to others. Include yourself as well, but now include others. These countless others who share your suffering. May we all be free of this suffering. May we all have happiness, peace, and joy. Now bring your field of awareness to persons in your life, persons in your community that are there, but that you really do not acknowledge in any sort of emotional, human-to-human level. Perhaps coworkers, neighbors, persons you engage with in the marketplace, places of worship, individuals maybe that you superficially see, maybe exchange pleasantries with, maybe not. And then consider that just like yourself, just like others that are similar to yourself, others that you care for, these other persons in your community, just like yourself, have had ups and downs, have loved ones, have goals and aspirations, want to be valued, want to value others, want to contribute to their community. And recite in your mind for these individuals, just like myself, these other persons want to be happy and free from suffering. Just like myself, these others want to be happy and free from suffering. Now come back to your breathing. And now think of persons in your community that you might have difficulty with. Persons that in some way are different from yourself, maybe in terms of values, maybe persons who irritate you, who anger you, maybe persons who have harmed you. Persons that instinctually, on a very immediate level, you have some sort of negative reaction to. Either as individuals or perhaps stereotypes, groups of individuals. So bring this category of persons to mind. And again, reflect, just like myself, these persons have had ups and downs. Consider that these persons are no different from yourself in that each of them has had ups and downs. Each of them has a network of important human relationships. Each of them has goals and aspirations, wants to contribute to their community. Remember to sight in your mind for these individuals. Just like me, these persons want to be happy and free from suffering. Just like me, these persons want to be happy and free from suffering. Now extend your awareness to encompass the entire community, the community in which you live and which you engage. Some of these individuals are dear to you or similar to you in many ways. Others perhaps are really out of your field of awareness or concern. Others perhaps are enemies or difficult people. And then consider that on a fundamental level, each person in your community wants to be happy and free from suffering. Each person in your community wants to be loved and valued and to contribute. Each person has goals and aspirations, loved ones. And recite in your mind, just like me, each of us wants to be happy and free from suffering. Just like me, each of us wants to be happy and free from suffering. And now come back to your breathing. So that's an abbreviated Common Humanity meditation. And again, what we're really cultivating in this practice is the power of perceived similarity. We're habituating our mind to see others as the same as ourselves on this fundamental core level. So to me, it's really all based on, first of all, on our self-compassion, our self-loving kindness. If I haven't tapped into that aspiration, then I can't really have empathy for others on that level. And I see this as a very secular concept. I see it as a truth that's kind of underneath all the different religions or lack of religions, humanistic perspectives, etc. So it's applicable across the board to me. So the more we work on our self-compassion, our self-loving kindness, the more we are able to connect with others. And then as we develop this spirit of common humanity, this recognition of common humanity, in turn, that allows us to empathize more with ourselves. So it goes back and forth. It's a give and take. Our self-compassion increases our ability to embrace this perspective of common humanity. And the more we do so, the more we're able to come back and give ourselves more compassion. So they mutually reinforce one another. And it feels good in my perspective, in my practice, experience, cultivating this spirit of impartiality, equanimity. It feels good physically, mentally, etc. So I see it very much as a health practice in terms of my own self. It is a practice of self-compassion. So again, we're really breaking down some of the barriers that we may have to really connecting with others on this level. I use the term boxes. Sometimes we put people into boxes. We label individuals and put them in boxes. Attribution theory says that we attribute things to persons. And it's based on our own projections often. And then based on these attributions, we make all sorts of judgments about, for instance, in terms of suffering, they deserve their suffering perhaps. They got what they asked for. They made their own bed. They're not worthy of compassion. Or they are worthy of compassion because. So there's these conditional elements in our attributions often. So what we're working on here is an unconditional recognition of similarity. And it's a work in progress. Don't expect to get there overnight, but at the same time, in my experience, this practice in particular will open avenues of connection that did not exist, perhaps fairly quickly. And it doesn't have to be this grand explosion of compassion. It can be a simple recognition of the humanity of the other person if we're interacting with another person. Martin Buber talks about the I-thou relationship versus the I-it relationship. In the I-it relationship, we're going through life objectifying individuals, treating others as objects in a sense. Objects to be pushed aside, objects to be used for our benefit, etc. In the I-thou relationship, we're recognizing the humanity of the other. We talked quite a bit last class. I won't go through it all, but some of the boxes I think that we label and put people in are articulated very well in the research of Susan Fiske. There are those that we envy, perhaps have contempt for, scorn. There are those that we dismiss. There are those that we pity in the sense of looking down on. And there are those that we see as like ourselves, but often again based on these sort of labels and stereotypes. They're like me in these ways, therefore I affiliate with these individuals. And what we're doing is softening these edges, making these boxes more malleable. On a perceptual level, Buddhist psychology says that when we encounter any sort of phenomena, something that we experience, there's like a continuum there, but basically our response is either attraction, indifference, or aversion. And here we're applying that basic habitual response to individuals. And we're trying to make that initial habitual response more even-keeled. And that is equanimity, that's common humanity, that's impartiality. And that's really the soil from which compassion grows. At least the compassion, the type of compassion we're looking for in this program or that we subscribe to. And I would say that seeing this common humanity in others is really a way of validating the goodness in ourselves and others. It's overcoming the negativity bias, the bias we have often to see negativity first, to see difference first. Rick Hansen says we have Velcro for the bad, Teflon for the good. So we're bringing our attention to the goodness in ourselves and others, and slowly and systematically training ourselves to see that first, to make that our habitual default response. So just from a personal perspective, I think this is very beautiful. And also practical. It's not high in the sky here. There are methods that work, methods that were designed and proven over time to have this result. These are time-tested practices that have been adapted to a modern secular program. And secular here does not mean anti-religion or opposed to religion or spirituality. Secular here means it comes out of the Dalai Lama's notion of a secular ethic, that it's necessary for us in this modern age to have a secular ethic. And that is an ethic that's common to everybody, regardless of religious perspective, regardless from lack of religious perspective. We need a common ethic. And I see this aspect of common humanity as a potentially important part of that. We exist as humans first. And because of that, we share something with all others. And from there, all these other differences emerge. So we're really working on our level of appraisal. Appraisal meaning like how we evaluate things. We're appraising ourselves and others all the time. Preconsciously, subconsciously. And here we're really softening those appraisals. And I would claim that this is not some mind trick, but we're actually seeing the world more clearly. I would say this aspect of common humanity is really a fact. It's a way of seeing who we are truly first, rather than not seeing this at all often. So these are a few reflections on this practice of common humanity. And I will see you soon, and I will record a second video discussing a little more in depth this process of broadening compassion.